Good afternoon, and welcome to a brief screencast where I compare coding with an LLM, in this case Anthropic's Claude 3.7 Sonnet in the browser versus in the editor, in my editor, VS Code, using an extension called Cline that lets you connect, typically over MCP, Model Context Protocol. It's like the USB of AIs or people to AIs. Which provides some benefits. And to show you what they are in a nutshell, I'm going to show you a small problem that I have, or an opportunity, not a problem, opportunity, in a code base that you can see right here. So this is Alberta Well Finder. It's a way of looking at well sites, which are these circles, and their status, etc. The facilities, these are things that like process the things that come out of the ground, gas, oil, etc. And then pipelines. And so the pipelines, you can see different colored lines depending on what they're piping. Here's crude oil, etc. So what is the issue or opportunity? Well, it's this. If you look at where there are many, many pipelines, southwest of Edmonton, for example, we can see that in cases where the pipelines, these are three layers, so well sites, facilities, those are the triangles, and then the pipelines, the lines, depending on how they are fetched, the order in which they're rendered can be different. And so here you see the pipelines are overriding the well sites. And that's not really what I want. I want the pipelines to be rendered, then facilities, and then well sites. Because well sites are what most users typically are interested in to start with, and then pipelines are not the first thing. And so what do? Well, let's start in the browser. If we go to Claude, and we'll paste in a prompt. So in map 2, so that's this, actually, sorry, that's the route, which is down here. So if we look at map, where are you, map? Oh, there we go, map 2. So this is my route for the map view, map 2. I want the layer rendering order to be pipelines, facilities, then well sites, in that order regardless of which fetch returns first. Do you understand my intent with 100% confidence, or do you have clarifying questions? Always a good thing to say at the end of a question or an issue when you're talking with LLMs, because as I mentioned in an earlier video, more than one, they're not always trying to give you the best answer or the truth. They're trying to satisfy your question, which is not the same thing always. So by adding a prompt like this, we can make it ask more questions in order to align its work with our intent, our purpose. Additionally, I'm going to upload a little screenshot of, well, that's not the screenshot. Where's the screenshot? Here it is, of what I just showed you. So it's basically a screenshot of this. And because I'm working in the browser, I have to show it the files that I want it to reason on. And to do that, here we go. We'll go over to my Finder, and the refactoring is happening in one directory. So previously, currently, actually, we have map and these different files. I'm refactoring them into reasonably smaller components that makes it easier both for me and these AIs to reason on. One of the things you'll find if you have one file with like 2,000 lines of code is that the models quickly run out of tokens or they get confused. If you keep the components of the files smaller and do little things like, for example, here, add as a header the path of the file, even if you're not using an editor, but you're just copying and pasting or dragging and dropping this entire folder into the model, which we just did, it helps the AI to sort of understand the relationship between these files. At least that's been my experience. I think in the future it's going to figure it out anyways. The inference level is improving on almost a picosecond basis, but there is what we have. So we have the question, are you sure? A screenshot, and so the thing to note is that Claude in this version in the browser has no direct understanding of this application, and it can't read what's in my editor, all of the files. Even things like, which can be actually rather useful, database definitions, schema structure, all of my RPC procedures. It doesn't know. But in this case, it doesn't really have to. And so let's see what happens. And I'm going to start a stopwatch. And I might have to fast forward this because this will take a while. We'll see. And then we'll compare it to using Claude 3.7 Sonnet in VS Code using Klein and asking the same question, except giving it the context of the entire project if it needs to. All right, so let's start old school. And so here we've uploaded those files. It's analyzing, processing, ruminating. As it continues to talk to itself and to us, you'll notice that, yes, these files, there are, let's see here. The limit currently with Claude is 25 files. It's not really a limit on the length of files per se, although that will come into it because the token limit with 3.7 Sonnet is 200,000 tokens. So you have to keep that in mind. And that's actually where we run into trouble a lot when we're using the web-based models, including the other ones. Although Gemini 2.5 Pro has 1 million token context window, soon to be 2, they say. Yeah, so it's describing what I want. Oh, yeah. Actually, you know what? Explain the approach. Now, this is one thing that's kind of nice with the browser, is I find it's a little more interactive than using the agentic plugin. There is a option if we're in the, did I say browser? I meant editor. If we're in Klein, where we can say, let's do some planning, and we can even give it a bunch of tokens for the thinking process. This has ups and downsides. If the problem is really complicated, this one is not, in my opinion. It's actually quite straightforward. It will think deeper and read more code. However, it can kind of start to imagine problems that don't exist and write code that you don't want. So yeah, I'm not so sure about this. In fact, even switching to 3.5 at times seems better because the responses are terser. So it's telling us consistent layering system, Z-index-like pattern. Yeah, that's right. That's what I was going to do by hand. Or explicitly insertion order. Okay, I don't know. Centralized layer management. Okay, so it's not actually being very decisive. It's just saying these are the options. Let's proceed. Now, why would you, or why would I, or someone else, choose to copy and paste or drag and drop files into Claude on the web or desktop version, as opposed to using the editor? What are the pros? Well, one pro is that in order to get this level of AI assistance, the monthly subscription is $20 US, flat, and you can use it all day long. Within each conversation, you will run up against context limits. So that 200,000 token limit will happen, and you're going to see here, it's going to run out of steam and then ask me to continue. The other thing that it's doing is it's writing and rewriting the entire files in many cases. Now this can be adjusted, both write less, just the parts that need to change, or generate the entire files or components. But it both takes time and tokens, and then you run out of context. Now that said, sometimes you don't want it to have access to your entire project in order for it to stay focused on what you want. And this will inform the way you structure the project with respect to, as I showed you earlier, even something simple like file paths. So keeping, related things together. And so I can just drag and drop that into the browser and or the application, and it just works. So here it's, updated one file. It's updated or is updating another one. And this will take a while. I've done a little bit of pre-testing. We're up to now 4.5 minutes. Yeah. So what else can we say while this runs? It's writing a lot of code, and at the end of this process, I'm going to have to copy and paste from Claude back into my application everything that it writes or that it's changed. And that's the part that is kind of a bummer. So using the browser is kind of cheap and it's focused, but it's limited. Here we go. Pause reaches max length. Okay, so we can click continue. Now, I'm not really sure if this has to do with edge functions running out of compute. I don't know. It seems like, if they're using Cloud, something like Cloudflare workers or Lambda functions, something similar, that it's running out of compute, not token context. Well, max length for a message, so maybe it's a bit of that. Who knows? But it's continuing. But it is using quite a bit of time to achieve this. One thing I'll say about Claude 3.7 Sonnet, it's not a speed demon. Like it's fine, but it's not fast. But it is better than most of them. Although, is it better than Gemini 2.5 Pro? They seem to be neck and neck in many cases, in my experience. All right, so we'll just let it run. Now, in fact, as we let it run, we're at 6 minutes. Let's start this guy. Okay, and as we run it, we can see it thinking too. Okay, so it wants to run some command line bash shell. It doesn't always do this, but it is in this case. And actually, you know what? The reason might have a little bit to do with the fact that I don't have that file loaded, but let's just run it. Give it permission. Okay, run again. Okay, it found. Okay, so here's the entry point. So it found that map2 route, page.svelte, and in page.svelte, it found map new. So this is interesting how it works as an agent, and it's using these bash commands quite a bit. Okay, it wants me to update. Okay, we're going to update. Oh, and if you've ever seen Les Mis in London, that's what it looks like. Okay, so desktops and wallpapers. Okay, and okay, and it lost my current. Oh, here we go. Okay, so let's resume. Okay, and continue here. So it's not entirely a free lunch. You have to click continue at times, or resume task. Another difference, if you're using it in the browser, you have to subscribe to Anthropic's API, which you pay per use, not per month. Although you might have to pay per month in order to access the API. I'm not sure. I'm paying for monthly usage at $20 US. And so far, I've used through API usage, through the agent, Model Context Protocol, 18 cents US. And okay, so it's now doing its thing. And in the browser, in Claude Desktop, it's still writing. So it's interesting here, it's thinking, based on my analysis of the code, I see the layers are currently declared in the following order in the markup, which doesn't guarantee proper Z-index ordering. Right, and that's interesting. I changed the order of the rendering layers, but that's not the same thing because the rendering happens after the GeoJSON is fetched from the server, and then it's displayed. So if the pipelines return first, which are simpler to fetch, then they display first, which is actually what I want. But they don't. They often display last. Okay, it also wants... Okay, so here, it wants to actually run it in the browser. And at this point, I can say yes, but I've used 27 cents US, and I actually... I can test it myself. So here we go. I just hit reload, and sure enough, the pipelines are below the well sites. Okay. Okay, so I don't need to do this. By the way, why don't I want to do this? Running the browser testing is very expensive in terms of tokens. When I say very expensive, it's maybe like 25 cents at this point. So I can reject it. And this is the other nice thing. You don't have to agree to everything it proposes. And so are rendered, okay? Okay, and well, it turns out that it seems to be consistently correct. Here, let's slide over to somewhere else. And yeah, we have these pipelines. And they're beneath the facilities and the well sites, which they service. So I think that answers the question. We've spent 28 cents, and here I have neglected Claude Desktop, the browser version, a bit. So it's not quite 11 or 12 minutes, but you get the idea. It's still writing and rewriting. And so, you know, what does that mean? Even if the browser version does what my editor with Claude did, it takes quite a bit longer, and it is more work. And now, if it didn't get something quite right, it means repeating that process again, which in smaller cases is not necessarily a big deal. In fact, it can be preferred if you want to keep the focus small and you're doing like bite-sized code refactors and changes. But if many files are involved, in which case, in this case, they are maybe not entirely involved, but they are relevant in terms of context, then, okay, there we go. It's finished, I think. Then it's something to keep in mind. In any case, we have our solution, and it seems to work great. Well, I've learned a lot. Hope you have as well. Thanks for your time. Have a great day.